Hey everyone! Today I'd like to talk about a really cool platform that uses complex AI to generate interactive dialogue based on deep contextual character traits. This is a quick one. Before we get started, I'd like to mention that my content is powered in part by my patrons, the subscribers of Andrew David Plus. By subscribing, you get early access to videos, behind-the-scenes content, exclusive monthly video updates, access to join our private Discord hangouts, and more. Inworld is a tool for building AI characters for your games, software, or the metaverse. It's incredibly easy to use. You start by creating a character and populating all the information fields. Those fields are quite robust and includes details such as description and purpose, identity, mood, personality, and even a Wikipedia link for the engine to use as source character data. I sat down with some of the team members from Inworld and discussed some of the inner workings of their system. For example, one of the mood sliders, emotional fluidity, allows for the character's mood and personality to fluctuate a little bit as opposed to behaving strictly based on the selected emotions. Using this in combination with the triggers and goals system, you can create some really realistic character behavior.
Once a developer has integrated Inworld into a project in something like Unity or Unreal, within the Inworld Studio interface, you can set up goals and action. Goals are basically things that the character will do or react to in response to triggers that you might set up in your development environment. So, for example, in a demo that we have on our YouTube channel, we have a shopkeeper that will respond when the player walks into the physical location of the shop and will automatically issue a greeting.
Hey Shirley, what's up?
Hello.
But then we also have a trigger that he has where if the player does certain things within the shop, it will trigger an emotional response and a dialogue response from the shopkeeper. So you can add in emotional states as a result of that. One thing that's neat though is that unlike in a sort of traditional environment, you don't need to sit there and write out the dialogue that a character might speak if something is triggered. Instead, you can just, like the rest of the character, describe it in natural language. So the shopkeeper, all you might want to say is, tell the player to stop touching their stuff. And that doesn't mean that they're going to say that line every single time. They'll probably say a bunch of different varieties and variants on it. And that's just because of the AI.
Inworld uses internal machine learning models in order to continuously learn and improve their character dialogue, which means your characters will always react and converse realistically.
So under the hood, we have a variety of different machine learning and large language processing models. We don't actually really talk about them in detail because a lot of them are proprietary to us, but they are quite similar in terms of power and ability to other ones that are on the market. But of course, this kind of stuff is evolving and improving pretty much on a daily basis, so it's something that we're continually working on.
What I find to be interesting about Inworld is its multifaceted use cases. On the one hand, you could use their tools as a catalyst for creating realistic character dialogue. Simply create your characters and then use their live chat system to have real conversations with your own characters. Once those conversations are completed, you can export the chat transcript and implement it into your game, adjusting where necessary. The chat functionality is also great for testing how your characters would speak or react to certain statements in order to tweak and perfect the character settings. On the other hand, you can use Inworld's Live API to implement dynamic conversations straight into your game without having to do any writing work at all. Of course, this approach would require your game to be always online in order to communicate with the API.
You are required to be online, and the product does connect and do computations at the time that you make the query of the AI. So in other words, anytime you're in a chat with an AI character, whether it's within our arcade or in Inworld Studio or potentially in a game integration, you are connecting live and in real time so that the model can send information back to you. That does mean that if you're a developer who's trying to build something that is offline, you might have a concern about that API, but one of our obvious necessities as a company is to make sure that we put in the kind of guaranteed uptime and service level agreements, things like that. So if somebody got into that kind of scenario, we would be working with them to make sure that things don't go wrong. And of course, developers can also build in sort of fail states for when things might go offline. For example, they might choose to generate dialogue and have it there available as a fallback state in basically text form in the game, but the dialogue itself was generated by Inworld.
It's up to you as as a developer to implement a fallback for that. Both of these approaches are great for saving time when developing on a tight budget like for indie games, or when on a tight deadline like for game jams.
We're already starting to see cases of where AI can speed up people's workflow, and in game development, especially anything that's narrative heavy, one of the biggest lifts is just writing that narrative. And often in games, a large part of that narrative is NPC dialogue. So one of the ways you could use Inworld is to help you generate dialogue faster than you might normally be able to write it, by creating the character that the player is going to have the dialogue with and then acting out that conversation. You could just copy that transcript and then put that straight into a game. So there's definitely potential there just for allowing people to generate text and NPC dialogue. Another use case for indie developers with Inworld would just be to replace what would normally be dumb NPCs with AI-powered ones. They would make the conversations in people's games a lot more interesting, a lot more stimulating, a lot more varied. By using things like goals and triggers, ultimately we see developers being able to actually move the narrative flow along through conversations with NPCs.
Imagine playing an old-school text adventure game, but instead of having to develop a complex parser that would only allow for certain text inputs to function, you could write literally anything you wanted and the characters would behave accordingly. This is just one example of how you can use Inworld to remove obstacles and limitations that would otherwise block your game's potential and creativity. And I'm sure you're thinking that having characters speak generated dialogue means that you cannot possibly have voice actors record lines for said characters. And that's why Inworld also features a voice system. While this is currently still being improved, it is yet another example of how Inworld can expedite your development process. Once your characters are generated, you can determine what voice you would like them to have, adjust it, and you've now given your characters in-game voices without having to record all the dialogue yourself. Inworld has a ton of potential, even in its current state, and you can try it out entirely for free. Whether you're participating in a game jam, or need a catalyst to generate character dialogue, or you're producing a full-scale game and want to give your NPC dynamic interactions based on your players' inputs, Inworld is the tool you've been looking for. I'm curious to know what you think of Inworld. What kind of games do you think you could build with it? And is it a tool you could find yourself using in the future? Let me know in the comments below. Also, you can click on this other video I made if you're interested in more AI-powered tools for your indie games. And of course, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe if you enjoy this type of content. Thanks for watching.